and whatever I see is smiling at me. Love is who I am. Hello there, beloved Ascension pioneers, and welcome to this free video course from me, which is going to be about quantum cognition and multidimensional brain waves, and basically brainwave expansion as we are moving into our ascension. This will talk about the multidimensional consciousness, and if you want to go deeper into that, watch my free course that is devoted to multidimensional consciousness all on its own. I also have many courses on this topic. Just scroll down my main page, which is set up in a light. Go down below where you can find my main courses and a free course on multidimensional consciousness if you scroll down. So if you remember back in the beginning of May, I recorded the first Ascension update in 2 parts, the main basic part and the Galactic update part. And the main part, as well as the expanded galactic consciousness part, both dealt with this brainwave expansion and the rewiring of our brain as we're moving into our ascension. Because, as you know, ascension is the union, which is the unification of the higher mind, the higher divine intellect, which is not the same as our monkey brain, and that in alignment with the fusion with our higher heart, which is going to be reciprocally expressed in the fusion of our left and right brain hemisphere. So this merging within the higher heart, which is an octave where we are completely operating within the threefolded natural flame structure, which is the love, wisdom, and power as one. And when that meets that divine logic in the higher octave and you create this synthesis, this opens the gateway for this multidimensional ascension. And I have a course called Multidimensional Ascension, which talks about the very nature that ascension is not a linear, not just a gradual process we might experience in one part of your human embodiment, but it's also a parallel experience that is multidimensional in its basic nature. So in this previous update I've shared with all of you, you can see a little bit of the fine details that I've shared about this. And in this course, I want to go deeper into the nature of what's happening with our brain, the nature of different bandwidths of consciousness, which are different brain waves that we can relate to, as well as just tuning into what this expansion actually brings to us, okay, as we're moving deeper and deeper. There's many internet sites. I recommend you to just type in something like brain waves or alpha, beta, gamma, delta waves of consciousness. You can find a detailed, in-depth description. I wanted to put in this video, but then it would be too long. So I said, everyone can use Google. Anyone can enhance their knowledge with that. There's one page where I read very much in depth and detail about the different brain waves as well. And there's a lot of understanding there. So you can move on in your own high understanding of this, so you'd have higher waves of consciousness, which would be like higher pitched sounds. We often have, when we have these higher downloads coming in, you can hear a high pitched, very tuned in sound, right? And then the lowest octave, you can almost like associate that with the drum bass and a very dense frequency. And the thing about waves of consciousness is that we are moving in this balance of all waves coexisting as one. So this is the fusion we're creating. But our brain in its totality is not just divided into what we would say left brain hemisphere, right brain hemisphere, and then we have the frontal lobe, we have this inner area, which we could say, and I made this picture here down at the very bottom. So our third eye, and basically the pineal that's in the back, we associate it with the pineal gland. This is where the divine light comes in. And with the awakening and the ascending process, more and more of that light starts to come in this fusion. So as light goes in a certain spiraling movement, and I address this in my Tantrika Life Force Mastery course in the second part, which is a bonus part video, in which you can learn to use this propulsion and this galactivation to upgrade your consciousness, because this is what's actually happening. But I keep getting these messages that understanding of how our brain works and how these different waves of consciousness are affecting us is becoming pivotal in our ascension, because ascension is not just something we can associate with love and light movement. It's a very scientific process, after all. And the more scientifically we tune into it, the more we have this higher understanding. So in the nature of the science of Kriya Yoga, this spirituality is also seen as science, because there's a scientific mechanism to how our bodies work and how everything is structured. And there's different sciences. Just like, here with the question mark, what does the quantum cognition really means? And this is actually the understanding that consciousness is always a predecessor of what we experience as the coming thoughts, what we're thinking, what we come into our visions about. So how I came into this, in the beginning of the month of May, when I first, I tuned into, I just get these messages, and messages were coming in and streaming through, and it was like, it's all about the brain. I'm like, how's that, And then I went back, and in my physical life experience, I always have signs and things showing me these as messages. And I actually met a person who's a doctor for the brain, who's studying the brain. And then I was watching this show called The Big Bang Theory, and there's this narrow biologist there, played by this woman. And as much as, these are awesome things, and awesome shows, there's a lot of things also encoded there when we watch from the perception of the awakened presence. And when I watched, they had this almost like a talk about this experiment, which was called the quantum cognition. Does consciousness perceive everything we do? And does everything kind of like relate to that? And they were trying to scientifically prove that through equations and different calculations. So everything in my life was about the brain. And I remember I even got this crystal skull, and I'm looking at it. Well, that's also a skull. That's also brain. Everything started happening this month, and I started getting these messages that it's time to share and it's time to go deeper into understanding ourselves and kind of like detecting these different brain waves once we understand what they're all about. So perhaps you're one of the people who already knows a lot about these different brain waves. Perhaps you're a beginner. So I'm going to go from the beginning a little bit about this, explaining the whole science behind this. And you know that everything in our body is about physics, it's about biology, it's about chemistry. It's all actually one science. And in Kriya Yoga, all these sciences are seen as one and united. So when you do the one science that's behind all of these sciences, which is the science of breath, because breath is the propulsion of life. It is how we master our life force. It is how we learn to cultivate our life force, and it's how we learn to become conscious creators, and it's how all life is created into being. So once we understand ourselves, not just spiritually, but also scientifically, because science and spirituality in its core essence were always one. So when there's a fusion of the left and right brain hemispheres, you can see the coming together of logic, which is the structure, and the linear processing comes together with the more intuitive and artistic and imaginative expression of our being. A lot of people have an imbalance of that, so they might go too much into one stream of of this duality, of this opposition, forming more and more opposition as they come into their embodiment. And perhaps when people go more into the other direction, what we're aiming for here, like I said, the gateway of ascension, which is the higher mind and heart connecting, but not just connecting, making a fusion, a conscious fusion, where actually the science of your body, literally, it's kind of like this portal naturally starts to exist. It starts to create this natural propulsion of your multidimensional ascension, which is, again, remember, the higher mind, the higher heart connected together as one and unified. In this way, what you can start noticing is that the areas in the brain of our current reality with this multidimensional expansion, so these new areas of brain will start to be enhanced because they're being stimulated by these higher frequencies. And as we're going to tune into the different waves, you're going to learn about these different things, because many times when we watch certain news, they're saying such as, oh, these cosmic rays are now bursting and hitting the atmosphere of our planet. They're entering the core of our planet and all of us, because everything is living, everything is alive with consciousness. Every pulse of life is actually first directed through consciousness. And as much as I was infatuated with the idea that these scientists in the show were trying to prove that through equation and with the usage of biology and the understanding of the neuroscience and physics, I was really fascinated by this, because I think as much as these equations can be and they exist, there's a lot of us who already know this and recognize this as the truth. It's just how it is. So for eons and eons of time, what was happening is that the conscious mind has been ruled by ego. And that's why there's so many of us who are almost like trapped in this whirlpool of this energy that continuously recycles us in this certain state of awareness, which is the awareness which filters through a lot of perception, through linear processing, and the perception of time, which is the three-dimensional construct. This kind of third dimensional and linear only, and almost like this conscious mind which does not merge with the higher unconscious and the superconscious part of our being, can be most easily manipulated, infiltrated, and brainwashed. That's why, and I've mentioned this in the predecessor of this video, which is about Ascension pioneers, volunteer souls, and the brainwave expansion, is that when the forces that be that want to prevent this ascension from happening, they're using everything in their power to first, you know, this not to open, which is the third eye, the pineal gland expansion, which is through the infiltration of many toxic, not just the toxic environments and the pollutants that go in our air, but also in our food, and like fluoride, right, in the toothpaste and things like that, and many products, so that this would be almost like so calcified that this higher light that I drew here could not enter. Because why is the brain so important is the brain has, when you look at the structure of the brain, it's almost like a little micro universe in it, right? And the brain, when the fetus is still in the state of being, in unified version before it grows in a certain way and becomes more and more humanoid in form, the brain and the heart are seen together as one. So they're always connected. That's why Ascension is, in a literal meaning, in the scientific meaning, not just this esoteric wishy-washy thinking, is the unification of these two worlds, which are actually just a one world. So because this conscious mind for eons and eons of time has been manipulated and ruled by ego, it's so hard for so many beings to shift. This cognitive quantum perception can be so easily accessed, actually, with just this natural occurrence which is now happening with the infiltration of these higher rays and the alignment with the galactic core, which is our galactic center, and many different alignments that are happening. And a lot of us know and feel that as these energies are pouring through. That is being, in a way, more difficult because of what's being done to prevent this. But luckily, when we have this understanding and we start expanding through it, we're doing the kind of conscious cognition, and we're becoming more conscious where we put our focus, where we put our thinking, where we put our energy in, because we start understanding that everything is waves of energy that travel. So when I did this sketch of the brain here, I didn't just divide it into left and right, right? Right? So what I did is I showed you that this is also a part of a spiral, which is what I talk about as the galactic a pulse of life. And if you want to learn how to cultivate through the tantric life force, your own life force that lives as the primordial ancient life force within you, and then how to first raise it, cultivate it, through that self-mastery, because self-mastery is always a predecessor of the mastery that we're stepping through as a unified ascension in our planetary ascension. So master yourself first so you can become the master of the universe, In a way, this you can use now the upgraded version to uplift your consciousness, to upgrade your consciousness. And this was then later as an addendum shared in the bonus video of the Tantrika Life Course Mastery, which was called the Galactic Pulse of Life. And if you want to start really consciously working on that, understanding yourself and working with the unweaving, almost like this, it's like you have a coiling serpent, that's our kundalini life force that starts to awaken, and then you're rising it, and then you have another thing here. So I'm shown that for our ascension, there's a certain amount of light quotient that we need to raise, so that our higher heart is activated, and then from that part on, so that we start lifting into a higher mind, divine logic, so that it starts to connect in a higher scientific sense, then another propulsion is necessary. So this light quotient then was shared in the addendum, which was the galactic pulse of life, consciousness raising. Okay. Um, the thing is here that, like I said, this is a part of a bigger spiral. So our brain is like a network, and here I've been writing about that this deals with the expansion of the neuro networks. So the neural pathways, many times they're called the neural pathways, right? Um, the more awake you become, the more multidimensional your cognitive thinking, and basically not just thinking, because we're not just thinking, but the processing that is like just pure consciousness without any filters of this ego-driven mind, which was patterned for eons of time, the more neural networks you will start to create, which looks like little synapses are just going off, and more light are being sparkled, and more quotient of this light in the brain. It's almost like if you imagine putting a when they have these helmets, right? But it's actually a helmet of light, and there's like little tiny dots in it. You know, like they wear these hats, I think, to create perm, you know, when they're doing highlights for people, and then they pull little tiny little hair. So it has many holes. So imagine this being translated into the brain area, and it's like, imagine sparkles and sparkles of light being ignited. So when we have these ideas and visions that come, they're a part of this because we're tuning into this higher wave of consciousness. So this lower part, which is most easily manipulated and brainwashed, is because it was held separate for so long. So this conscious mind and a part of the unconscious was held so much tightly in this dense form, just as our planetary life force has been for eons of time, that the unconscious was not able to perceive these higher waves. But now with the incoming, with the stream of light from the galactic core and our own ascending process with the ascending life force of our planet, the unconscious is now able to perceive the higher waves. And this fusion is happening, the merge, which means that what's happening is, how could I put that? Well, with the stimulation, this means that the fusion of the unconscious, the conscious, superconscious is becoming more and more one. Let's just put it as simply as that. And with that, as you can see here, I've written the 3% of what we call our human DNA and our human genome versus the rest of the 97%, which we say, what is that? Well, that's all galactic stuff and beyond. And the more these neural pathways are built, which is like neural networks, that means more of this light quotient is able to return. As you know, ascension is not leaving or exiting the body. It's actually a divine remembrance state, and it's returning to what already is, because the higher aspects, those aspects that are higher, they don't need to ascend. They are those aspects that descend into matter and create lower forms of density and the expansion of forms, so that life could evolve from those states and moving further and further up. Just as much as there's always this transmission of the divine life quotient from higher to the lower, and so forth. So this higher brain potential, and then the rest of the 97%, which is all galactic, is not junk DNA, right? So this 97 junk DNA in the body is being activated through the higher frequencies of light. And before we say a little more, I want to say that these three main waves of consciousness, these different states that actually also reflect where we are, and we're always shifting a little bit from a little denser, a little lighter, you know, like I say, sometimes we have this sluggish, slow, tired feeling, and these are all like lower waves, and sometimes we have very hyper and hyperactive, and these are these higher waves. So when these waves come and hit our planetary atmosphere from the outside, this also stimulates you, because you do incorporate more and more, not just, you know, you always perceive that you're receiving directly, right? Okay, from the sun, because we're receiving this light through your inner eye. But you don't just receive light from there. Like I say, you also simultaneously cultivate it constantly from the core. And that is so important, the fusion of the core and that which is being stimulated here through the, the inner pathways and the inner light through the pineal. So when you get to meet those aspects, and this is what I say, this is the meeting space for embodied physical ascension. And a lot of people think it's only about this part and, only assimilating through the pineal gland. That's why there's so much talk in ascended circles and spiritual circles about the pineal gland kind of ascension. It's not the whole story. So the cultivation of our life force is the other part of the story, and it deals with you mastering life force so that these aspects merge. And what is in the middle? It's your higher heart. So when the higher heart is kept in this enlightened state, when it activates again, it becomes a portal in its own. It starts to ignite light forward. This is when the higher mind is activated. They merge, they fuse, and this fusion will start to be felt almost like your brain is expanding. You start to have more cognitive, almost like precognitive abilities, psychic phenomena, visions, insights, tremendous amount of ideas. All those of us who are visionaries, we work with higher levels of light, and voluntary souls specifically, we come from multidimensional streams of light already. We don't need to ascend more. What we need to do is embody the already ascended forms of where we reside as beings of different, whatever it near, past, parallel, alternative timelines. And the more these neural pathways are built, the more of that we're actually able to tune into, and perhaps not always consciously. It doesn't mean you have an experience and you're going to say, okay, this is because this was a past or parallel reality. It comes through soul gifts and abilities. And because these higher waves of consciousness stimulate those, like I said, there's a lot of agendas that go against that, so that humans would stay in this lower form and they would not start to get this idea what's really happening and what's really the matrix and what's truly the creatrix of all life, and who are we as beings, and who are we as not just living this one reality, that we're actually living simultaneously many realities, because our consciousness from the beginning of the seedling of our birth has expanded in multiple timelines, multiple versions of the self. Because just today I was doing my cosmic drawings, which are going to be part of my book on the mission of the grand design and volunteer souls, has been showing this divine baby, like a divine fetus, and then it further expands into divine trinity, and then into greater aspects, and all 12 of meaning galactic consciousness is the 12-folded aspect, and the 13, which is that source, that seed that you always have the entire potential written in. It's almost like the story of the crystal skulls. They have 12. They had in Atlantis 12 crystal skulls, and the main one being the master skull, the 13th octave. So this is becoming so important, and with this fusion you're starting to get that, not just as ideas, but you're starting to connect with that part of you that is that seed, that divine seedling. So in our human state of consciousness, there's three major states, so different brain waves and bandwidths of consciousness, if we can call them like that. So the unconscious mind, that sometimes we say, okay, that's also a dream world, or the suppressed things or emotions and things we're not always able to consciously perceive, we relate to as, we have the unconscious, the alpha and the delta waves, right? So this is also related to the fourth dimensional space of experience. Then we have the conscious mind, which is the beta. We talk about the beta waves, and this is the third dimension of our current perception, and these are the waves that encapsulate that. It's almost like if you use analogy of light spectrum, right? You have the densest, you have the visible light, and then you have the ultraviolet, right? So you have the infrared, the visible spectrum, and all the colors that we know, and then the ultraviolet, which ultraviolet is just a gateway to other realities and other colored spectrum and all of that. But in our current cognition and being human beings that are evolving in this current evolutionary form and trajectory of consciousness expressed the way it is, then we're currently tuning into that reality. So the super consciousness relates to the gamma waves, and this is that fifth and beyond realm. This is what it relates to. So when we have these news about gamma waves hitting our earth stream, these are always activating us deeply. So when we see or feel within us certain waves of energy that are moving us, and we feel hyperactive or very expressive, and we just get these ideas, or sometimes it affects our body as well, because what I receive is in my own knowing that the gamma waves are actually those that are mutating our physical form the most, because they work on such subtle levels. And because creation first unfolds in the most subtle levels, this is what's most necessary. And the gamma waves are actually mutating our form. So they're those waves that are expanding us in this higher attuned consciousness, but not just in our cognition, but our physical form is actually changing as a result of that. So we are starting to tune into the multidimensional awareness through those gamma rays. And we could say a lot of meditative experiences. There's also a state called the theta, right? That's a pi. Sorry, there's a theta. I can't draw it now, but let's say it's TH, theta, right? So the theta waves are known to us as very, very deep states of meditation, and theta waves often open like a gateway as a precognitive experiences, so we could have an experience of gamma, which is so subtle that you don't really even say, oh, that's meditation, or this is this and that. Okay, so that's why this is so important. What's happening with this fusion here is that there's a connection of the conscious and unconscious mind, and that's why for our ascension, the first thing that it's so important is to create the synthesis. And I always talk about the synthesis being the fusion of all realities through being able to do that in one form. And you say, how? If I'm in this form, how can I, take care of the other realities? I'm not there. Yes, you are, because of what is called the now time. And the now time is where the the fifth octave and beyond really begins, because the linear time only relates to the 3D consciousness, or lower 4D. Here in the now is actually the past parallel, the alternate realities, and the probable realities that you're creating, becoming aware of yourself as a conscious creator. So when you do that, you know that your brain waves are starting to expand to these higher octaves, and there was enough leverage created through these high-pitched sounds, and these were actually activations for us. A lot of activations from my higher selves coming this way, and they don't come as in a way we'd imagine. We always imagine we ask for guidance and it comes through words or sounds and visions and images of beings of light. Not really, because like I said, gamma is so subtle. It's just so subtle that it's not something you would see or visualize. These are still lower waves. If you have visions, and that's why I always say the psychic energy is still lower energy, because it still functions through perhaps states of, you could relate it to states of not such high meditative experiences. Like alpha relates to a lot of artistic waves. Here we have the artistic, imagination, intuitive, but we also need the logic, right? So we know how to integrate that. Although the fifth dimensional experience, the fifth dimension cannot be understood. It's not something you understand. It's not cognitive in a way that, okay, I can understand it with my concepts that I knew so far in my third dimensional existence and reality. Not really. That's why it's so important to go into this now, which is the total releasing of time and constructs and even language and labeling. Because if I say something to you with words, which is for now still necessary, but in the future to come, in the near future, we won't be unnecessary for us to do that, because we'll have a direct thought transfer. It's like I often experience with people I'm very connected to. Just today, I asked my mother about my sketch. I said, what do you think I should put here with this color? Do you have an opinion about this? And she said, I don't know. And she went away. And I wanted to do it all black, but then I was guided to do some gray and add something different. And she came in and said, oh my God, you did it the way I send you. I had this vision of this. I said, wow, it's a shared vision. So we're going to have more and more intrinsic experiences with these activations, because we're going to be wired differently, which means our whole thinking processes will change. We won't anymore be guided to even think about time as a linear construct. Even when you will find yourself saying, okay, when I do this, I'll do that, and after that, it's like thinking in sequences, you will start to notice that your whole body will react differently. Why? Because if you imagine your body having different cells, right? So every cell holds a structure of your current consciousness. And although we say, well, how? Well, because the cells are, they're sharing information with each other. And I've written this term here, which is the morphogenetic field. In science, the morphogenetic field is expressed as, I don't have a literal meaning, check it up, right? Google it. But morphogenetic field means almost like there would be a group of cells that would all communicate together, and then it would share that, and you'd have organisms functioning a certain way. So the same thing would be for us when we start to tune into the morphogenetic fields of not just that are cellular, but expressed in bigger octaves. So like us as a whole being, or us as group of beings, and us as planetary group of beings, and us as a multidimensional group of beings, it's all a part of this. The morphogenetic means morphing, shifting, always morphing, shifting together. So if something within me shifts, like the 100 monkey effect, or some people call it the Mandela effect, things like that. That's a part of this multidimensional concept. I remember someone once wanted me to speak about this, and this is all about that. Perhaps the words are not used the same way, and people give it different names, but again, this is the language. The language, the labeling, this keeps us still in a linear concept, because language will make you, I say something and there's different people tuning into the video, and each will have their own understanding through the perception of what they were taught about that word having a meaning, or maybe they have an emotional response to that word, and it again produces different thoughts because of those emotions. So it's important to move into the synthesis and the now timeline, which is a merging timeline. So the gateway for ascension is this higher heart frequency, this portal of your own fifth density attunement, and beyond that, it's like new worlds open up, and you think more in terms of language of light, color, sound, essence. It's all different, right? So people who are very artistic, they're already having these waves very stimulated, but perhaps they do that when they do art, or where they produce music, or just tuning into a more channeled version of themselves. But as human beings, they can still very easily tune into the reality that's very dense and third dimensional, and time and all of that. But what we're doing here as a whole, changing our whole new species, becoming Homo luminous, the new human beings on the new earth, is we're changing our whole reality. Not just when we're tuning into, let's say I'm tuning into alpha waves, so I'm being artistic, but then I tune into beta, and my beta is ruled a lot through ego, and I can shift. We're creating this whole new, what I could call the morphogenetic field of the new human, which is always reverberating out these connected, synchronized, synced in frequencies. Okay, so it's important to connect the conscious and the unconscious mind, and this is where Ascension was leading us, so that we do the inner work, the shadow work, so that eventually this could unify, so that we be ready for this high shift, because it is happening. And the people who haven't done enough inner work, they're going to start feeling difficulties, because although they're subtle, like the gamma waves are very subtle, they have a huge impact on us as a species. So it's almost like, if you look at the nature of different planets that also do affect us, you could call this the personal planets that are closer to us in the orbit of our Earth, and then you'd say, well, then we also have the outer planets that are more transcendental planets and transpersonal planets, and they have a more wider effect to the whole of society. So that's kind of like similar with these waves. But because these waves, certain waves, especially low waves, are so dense that most people who they got used to these dense frequencies, because such huge manipulation was present on our planet, they can't detect them. But those of you who are living most of the time in your higher uplifted consciousness, you're going to be able to detect it, because you're going to have headaches, you're going to feel nauseated, you're going to have this bullshit lie detector, because people who are living from this multidimensional cognition in the now, we can't be lied to. Personally, I cannot be lied to. Whatever someone says to me, it's like, have you watched a TV show Sense8? Very cool show, because it produces a lot of these questions, different species of the humans, and how their brains are different, and they want to research and even lobotomize them. But the thing is, what's hidden behind those messages is that they're a new prototype of the human being, because they're representing the future of the species as it's evolving, and there's several of them, and they form these clusters that have different skills and abilities because of how they're wired in their brain. And the thing is that I think it's in the one of the first shows, when someone is being lied to, as they said, we're going to do this surgery on you, and there's a being who comes and guides the person, because they're just becoming aware of that they're sentient, right? And they're starting to have those perceptions and visions. And they say to them, well, that's a lie, because you can always tell a lie, because it's how you feel it in your body. And the body is a direct translation because it works through all the cells. All the cells start to work together in the morphogenetic field of the synthesis. They always act as a cohesive unit, and they start to operate like an orchestra within you. So when someone tries to pull, or when there's things happening in the collective and you're feeling sometimes they're dropping these lower frequencies, you can feel it because you're going to get very sluggish, sometimes even depressed. Sometimes you're going to feel these waves, but you, because you're so in your quantum cognition and your expanded brain waves and this assimilation of your multidimensionality, you will be able to perceive it right away. So what you will do is you're going to move more into yourself. You're going to do the breath work. You're going to go out in nature. You're going to do the work of being in your spirit and doing the inner work. That's why it was so important for our ascension, because this activation produces the full actualization of the superconscious mind. So as the conscious and the conscious and the unconscious mind, they merge in a sense that it's almost like they're still different faculties because they still serve different operational systems. They still have a unique purpose. They work now together because there's no more this ego barrier that ruled the conscious mind for so long, which did affect the unconscious mind as well. And that's why there were so many things in the unconscious that, instead of being serving us from, what would I give as an example? You know, there's many people who go to these hypnotic regressions, and a lot of times they're told that this cannot yet be released from their unconscious mind because the person's not ready yet, and it would just affect their conscious in a way that, you know, they would kind of not be happy. It just wouldn't produce a good example for their upliftment. So it rather stays in the back, working from the back, but not to go against them. The difference in that perhaps being a negative experience could be that it's something that you're in need of shifting, you're in need of that knowledge, you're ready, but you keep suppressing it because you don't want to, you want to either avoid or hide from, or, you know, just disconnect from your feelings and your personal truth. So because the 97% has been so important, there was everything created for humans so they wouldn't remember. And that was the sad part, that was the sad story. And now so many of us are here as volunteer souls who are assisting humanity. We're beings who have already ascended, who are already ascended beings of light, who have our own missions, who have our own specializations within the divinity of all creation. But we understood how important this is. So we infused a part of this, which we would say it's our physical vessel. We shared our spark, our higher spark, with these vessels so they could do this job of service and sharing all this information for what's happening, because it is so important. Let me see what else I've written here. So yeah, the fifth dimension, because it cannot be understood and what's beyond, which is almost like something that's an intimate experience you cannot superimpose upon yourself, or you cannot expect. It just happens. But what you do is your inner work, and you're getting ready, and you're starting to bring things up from your subconscious, so that the unconscious and the conscious start to meet. So I've heard recently this term used by the Arcturians, that fifth dimension can also be understood sometimes as the perfect storm. So it's something just happens and it's out of the blue and it's like a surprise for you, although you work for it. But the experience, that magical, what sometimes we call as humans is this bliss, but it's not all that. It's about learning to somehow obtain this bliss and create it as an evolution of our species, not just have moments of this blissful experience and then it ends there. So you can call it like this because we all have these moments and experiences, but what we're doing now with this expansion, that's an ongoing process, is we're releasing this third dimensional labeling. And I gave you an example, language system, all of that, and we're opening these spaces for the new. So the experiences that we hold on the level of programming are very differentiated and very personal. So I can see something and give it my own label. Someone else gives it something else. So when I use language, I might mean something totally different than when someone else does in a higher self-transmission. And it's pure, and then it starts to get filtered. And I've talked about this before with you. So what else I want to share here? Let's see. Yeah, basically remember that the ascension is that fusion of the higher mind and the heart as one. And a lot of people might say, well, how do I know this? How do I know I'm doing this? Well, the first thing, the first clue is always that people who are beginning to ascend, they're starting to notice that the things that once had meaning in their life, you know, casual things and the events you think you need to go through, the things you think you need to own and buy and relate to, they somehow no longer have your interest, and you keep pushing, and it's almost like you're not pushing yourself, but there's this higher force driving through you. And eventually you start to tune into these things. You want to get more, you want to do more from internally out. You don't want to just be spiritualized from without, because in truth the meaning of the word spiritual is spirit. So spirit is the life force of everything, and that's what spiritually means. So get my course if you want to go deeper, the Tantrika Life Force Mastery, together with the Galactic Pulse of Life. So yeah, um, if you want to, please read more in gamma rays. They're very cool. They're very, very fast moving, and they're very subtle how we perceive them. Um, Ask and commune with your higher self so that you will know. But it's not so important for you to know, okay, I'm in these waves, I'm in that waves. It's again, it's when you're doing that, you're trying to analytically approach yourself. But what you're doing is when you're just becoming conscious of these different waves and how they might feel, and you're meditating on that. So we all have experiences with meditation. You know, sometimes it's more like an alpha meditation. Sometimes you go deeper in the what I didn't know how to write with the theta, the theta states. Um, and the theta is like a gateway, right, which opens up um, the space for integration of these higher waves of consciousness, like gamma, which is really, it's morphing us. It's basically literally transforming us into new humans physically as well. So, okay, the multidimensional cognition means receiving in light packages of information as concepts. And like I've said, this is beyond language and concept. This is when you receive through your light body self, and then you start to translate it. But when you translate it beyond this linear fashion, which is, I need to do it this way and that way, and this is what it means. So that you might receive a vision or higher vision, and you want to transform it right away into something of work. But then again, you can imprint so much of the egoic structure on it if you don't allow it to become naturally through you. That's the natural morphogenetic process. So you know, receiving these light packages is one thing, you know, and these sounds, and then the other thing is to slowly, gradually incorporate them in our daily realities, turning those gradually into ideas and infusing, which means merging the multidimensional cognition with the linear 3D. So that's the, you're not saying, oh, I'm eliminating the 3D or the thinking or dimensional concepts, but it's kind of like it's a natural overriding process. It's the expanding process. So from your being here, it expands. So the core is always the same. Even when you're 3D, your core is the same as when you experience the 5D. That's the thing. The core is one, it's unified. So you're always ascending from your core. That's the most important thing to know here. The other thing that's really important, and I will use that later on in the, I'm starting to prepare soon, not yet, but soon, the second part of the Galactic Signature course. For those of you who have been really liking the course, this one was going to be more in how you work with your multidimensionality and how you use it and how you can tune into certain concepts of not just understanding your astrological placements, but also certain positions of the fixed stars and different modules there, and understanding mostly the cosmology of the body, because our whole human body is created as completely perfectly able to attune to the cosmic force and the life force. And understanding that gets you deeper into living your mission, understanding your mission, and working with your body, knowing your triggers in the body and which spots in the body serve different purposes. So like the brain, right? If you if you kind of like you draw a picture of a galaxy and you draw a human, right? So the brain, if we look at the galactic consciousness level, it's almost like the head of this galactic pulse. It's the same thing, whereas the heart is that pulse, right? The core. Um, Now let's return back to this eye and the image, the sketch I drew here, right? Remember that saying, which was, I don't know, was it in the Bible? I didn't read it. So it's let thy eye be single. And what this meant was the inner eye, that we start perceiving from here, and that all and many of the different masters and sages were able to tune to that. But because the earth was still so dense, a lot of them still didn't have a concept of what's fifth dimension and beyond, when they were physical. I don't mean like light beings, but when they're physical, they do not have a full experience, not all of them, because they still could only tune into perhaps maybe the higher fourth density and so on. Sorry, dimension. um, so the things you can do here to work a little bit with your body is, I always recommend this. Whenever there's a feeling of confusion or whatever, we always, as humans, we're naturally pulled to find an analytical approach and think about it. I say, oh, I don't know this. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to think about it. And you think. And it's unnatural for us to do that, actually. The more natural response is always to unwind, because as you're unwinding, you're resting. Like I said, these higher meditative states, like a higher alpha or the theta, which is deep meditation, where you can also travel to different realms of consciousness. It does not have to be associated with vision at all. I have these experiences when the energy is really high or something shifting on the planet. Sometimes I just lie outside in nature and I have this feeling that I feel so sleepy, but I don't sleep. I just shift somewhere and then I wake up and I'm like, where was I? I know I was somewhere and I don't know. I don't have visions or memory. It's like instantly gone. But I know I went into that higher state. It's almost like a trance state. And you don't remember, like in hypnotic regression, people don't remember in these higher states because the energy is so subtle. And a lot of them are surprised when they hear what they were talking about when they were being asked questions. So the only difference is when you're alone and you're in that meditative space, no one asks you questions, so nothing comes through. But you are expanding and you are traveling and you are integrating that in those moments. So it's important for us to unwind so we can work with the energy. Like I always say, massaging this area of the third eye. Or just imagining, I love this exercise that you can always do. Put one finger here and one in the back and just do like this. And then imagine the light streaming through. And your hands, as everyone can do Reiki, we all say, oh, you have to be a Reiki master, whatever. That's just universal energy. And when you have a pure intent, anyone can channel it through, especially for yourself. I'm not saying doing that work on other people, but for yourself, anyone can channel universal energy. There's no limits to this. So with this, your hand's capable of doing light, because your hands are that which moves the light into physical form. Hands of the creator, the hands of God, it said, right? So this is one of the things of the body cosmology. What you can also do with any of those areas, right? I always recommend massaging the different areas of your brain, your skull. Like you have 2 points here in the back, right here, where the skull kind of creates like this shape, an oval shape. And I always recommend you to use your perhaps index fingers to locate. It almost feels like different tiny holes, right? You have 2 here and then in the back, here in the back. There's also like here when the line goes like up here. I don't know the language for it, but you just shove, not too strongly, your fingers in it. And you can massage like this. And sometimes these areas will produce a little pain. So be gentle, because even though you don't do anything to your scalp, sometimes you're like, ow, why does this hurt, right? It's because there's so much happening. It's so much happening with our head and with the shifts, and sometimes just putting your hands right. And I always recommend, use your thumbs for these 2 holes, but the rest is like just locate the spots. I go like this, and do a little like this, and just start rotating. And I always see, when I do this, I see rainbow light twinkling. I see light sparkling on. Right? That's one of the ways I always see. It's like an instant shift when you close your eyes, but do that in a meditative space. I'm just showing you right now. So do it with relaxed breathing and pulsation and really being attuned to what you're doing. But I really recommend the exercise for the stimulate your optic nerve, because like I've written here, the optic nerve, and what's happening is these energies now, they're penetrating the neurosynapses. And these are the transmitters of all of these energy. So one of the exercises for the attunement to your inner eye would be just putting the this soft part of your palms here and your eyelids, and just gently massaging it like this. I can't do it now because I gotta be all smudged. But do that for a while to activate the neural pathways and to move deeper into your own cognition and the quantum cognition that takes place. It cannot place anywhere but in the now. And a lot of us think, well, I'm the now, I'm doing what I'm doing now, so I'm not in the now. Imagine where so many of your thoughts can be simultaneously, because I'm sure you have moments when even if you're outside in nature, you can be in most meditative space. I mean, I experienced that as well many times, and you still feel sometimes even I don't know, irritated by something, and that irritation is usually the external energies. Sometimes it's the densities coming from the people who are still abusing this planet, who are mistreating the planet. We don't take it as a being of light, but as just this piece of rock. um, or sometimes it comes from your own thoughts, because how many of you can have these feelings like when your thoughts are continuously that egoic control, it tells you, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to finish this, you got to meet those deadlines, you know, that person needs or expects this from you, and you're like, you know, I just want to live in the now. The more you resist it, the worse it is. What I do, in my that's my own practice. But what I like to do is, whenever my mind tell me these things, I play a rebel. So my mom would go, oh, go home and do this because you got to finish this drawing. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go here and meditate some extra in nature. So when I do that, I just express that part of me which intuitively knows what it wants to do through that joyful, blissful state. And when I do that, I ease up that voice. So that ancient part, which was the controller, and it's almost like that gatekeeper who used to say, oh no, this is how you do it, this is how you're free, oh, you can't be fully free. We need to be gentle with this aspect. We need to bring so much unconditional love to that aspect, because it's almost like this constant nagger. It's like, knock knock, you know, who's there? So I know, knock knock jokes, poor thing, but yeah, you know, this is what I wanted to share about this. There's many exercises you can do. You can also visualize spiral. Oh, I have here one of the really good things. I hope I can find it. I'll locate it. No, it's the wrong one. Wait a minute. Well, let's find it or what? I just can't find the right one. Here it is. So this is the, if you can see it, I hope you can. This is the so-called apophyllite pyramid. Apophyllite is such a good stone for this part. A lot of people use it to just like point it with the pointy part, and just you don't have to touch your head or anything. You're just like creating circles like this, and you will notice like an instant purification of this. So you can visualize. There's a lot of things we do with our creative intent. Just visualize all of that, which is, it's almost like these gray areas. It's like, oh, just visualize them as you're creating the spiral, like they're moving into the stone. And they're like, oh, you're pulling it. And just imagine like this constant washing over of your brain with the white light. Always work with white light. So, sorry, stones. Many things. So, anything that expands you in that way. So, what else do I have here before we go to... So anything expands, like I said, from one point, right? From one single point of consciousness. Everything is created from there, from this one point, and then spirals out. That's why the brain is not just left and right. Your body's not just left and right. You're not just man, woman, even feminine, masculine. Everything is this one focal point of expansion, and everything is created from there. So from your core, you're always ascending and moving from. So this is what it means, this conscious quantum cognition, that consciousness supersedes everything, and it gives orders. From that space, you are creating from your higher refined space. And you are refining your vibration when you're understanding these waves and feeling perhaps, ooh, these are some low frequencies. And what you do is, you become so conscious of every music you will listen to, even people saying things like gossip and things. You're like, no, I can't feed any more myself with this, because it's constantly feeding this space of programming. And the thing for us is that we have to know that not every piece that was created out there was with positive intent. A lot of what's placed out there, especially in the mass media production, especially with a lot of music that's more unconscious, it has very low energy waves. I remember once years ago, there was this popular pop song and I didn't even know it. And I just pressed on YouTube. I got instant headache. I'm like, oh no, I can listen to this. And the other person sitting there was like, oh, it's a nice song. I'm like, can't you not feel it? I was like, no. I'm like, you see, because certain people are operating on such lower consciousness that they can't feel these subtle levels. So the more sensitive you become, I know sensitivity is a gift and a curse in this world, because in a way you will become so uh, it's like you're gonna be able to perceive anything from the highest to the lowest. That's the curse, because when it's refined, it's not just for the light and the and all the refined subtle frequencies, it's for everything. So it's not for you to avoid anything, it's to acknowledge it, but you don't have to move your energy there if it's not in the direction of honoring where you are vibrationally. That's the important thing here. So the importance is also of grounding, because if you're not grounded, you can have the highest waves of consciousness, but you're not going to work with your life force expansion. Like I said before, it's this two-wave stream of energies that are moving. So the embodied energy and that which comes from the other higher levels of who we are. And that middle space is the space of grounding. So the body is the key. The importance of the activated and integrated vessel here is for our higher multidimensional consciousness expansion. And a lot of us with this, we're going to feel that our light body has spread out. We're going to feel like we're now wearing our light body. We're like more light than we are human. Although we still look physical, we appear physical because we need to be here. Our missions will be until we're assigned here on these duties as volunteer souls specifically. And those people who are ready for their ascended timeline, we have to hold our form, and we do it in this higher heart attainment. And this higher mind holds a vision of this form, and the higher heart holds this feeling state of how this will look like and appear. Okay, so what I also wanted to share here is that we have, let me read this because I forgot a bit. I have so much things I might forget sometimes. We have different templates for processing our intimate light language. Some people would hear and see, some people would not see or hear anything, and some are more channels or contactees, you know, people who are contactees for different forces of light, and some people don't. And I'm one of the people who doesn't have these things. I just know things, and I myself am wired. Spirit showed me that I'm wired by this cognition, which is an instant knowing. So I don't need the filters that many people need. I don't, because on my mission, it's not my mission to be a contactee or to contact these beings as outside. My mission is to be the pillar of light with fully integrated galactic consciousness, spreading it out, and that creates ripples because of the 100 monkey effect, or is it the 1,000 monkey? Hoping the 10th one so it's faster. Okay, guys, what this means is that you, if you're a volunteer soul, you came here with a specific encoding for your mission. And a lot of people might be, why am I not seeing this? Why am I not sensing this? I'm also, you know, in this multidimensional expansion, so why? Opposed to this, right? This expansion of our brain and the cognitive abilities expanding in a multidimensional template, we still will process intimately, uniquely. Because that's how it's meant to be. We're each unique spectacles, you know, of this light, and how we're holding our positions here in these bodies. And the missions are intertwined. They're all one. Unity consciousness does not mean that we all do the same thing. It doesn't make any sense. So people who came in to be contactees, their sole agreement was they even chose vessels with certain more prone to certain cognitive abilities than those who said, no, I'm going to be more the embodier, I'm going to work more with the feelings level, or different things. So for me, what I'm shown about my way of structuring, I made total peace with it and total acceptance, and the moment I did, I was more in it than ever before. Because when you want something that's not a part of your agreement in the soul, you confuse that with this, which means multidimensional consciousness means now we all are the same, look the same, we're all these multidimensional beings. And no, we still are within our own awareness, how much awareness we've integrated as different beings of light, and appearing to the certain definitions we have within our specifications. Like, we look at the nature of different beings, you'd say angelic kingdom works more with different frequencies and love, light, and comfort, and making you feel loved. than beings who are working perhaps with the creation of nature and the elemental forces, or the beings who are ascended masters. So they each have a different specialization, and so do we. And those of us who are here as volunteer souls, we need to learn our operational skills and not confuse that with not being multidimensional. No, it's just that how we tune into the multidimensionality through all, and how we filter it into our purpose, the mission that we have. These are two different things. So all encodements are done via our personal consciousness, right? So our personal consciousness still affects us. We're still a being with a unique experience. So now with this last photo I made, right, with the eye, let thy eye be single, how it receives light and then it further integrates that light. Here I talk more about, and this is I did in the beginning, about neural networks, building neural pathways. You do that exactly by tuning into these higher waves of consciousness. A lot of people do those brain stimulation waves through music, but again, there's this recommendation that if you overdo any of those things, if it's not natural, if it's a forced experience, you might overdo it. And sometimes what happens is people have elevated experiences before they're able to integrate them. That's, again, not a wise choice. So the grounding part is what keeps you safe and sane in this world, that you're operating within what's natural for your ascension, for your way of processing, because ascension is not something that's an ultimate experience that's the same for everyone. It's still deeply personal, unique as well. So when you do this, when you do any kind of work of building neural pathways, you have to do that in an integrated, grounded sense. And the more neurons connect, the greater our multidimensional cognition will be. It's just like this fusion is a cohesion. It's not all about data. It's not about getting plain information. Information in the highest sense is light. Light information in the higher realms is all one. As humans, we might still categorize, this is this, this is that, but in the higher realms, it's one. So what is important actually is the knowledge of how to synthesize this in an operating, integrated manner. So that's the synthesis as well of this video. We've talked already about the morphogenetic field, how we're existing within greater operational levels, such as greater collective organisms within the universe, not just that our cells are forming organisms and sharing within a certain field of consciousness. But when you are seeing yourself as a greater creator, you're a master of yourselves. And this is how you create your bodies, by directing, by seeing yourself, because you are. You know, I love in Dolores Cannon books, it always says, you're a god for yourselves. And it's true. So in the nature of the God concepts, there's different levels of God attainment. And this is how it is. But there's only one of the one. And that's this unity consciousness. One of the examples of this morphogenetic nature, of the altered multidimensional perception would be, I recently tuned into this consciousness. We know when we look through the Hubble's telescope, we look at different galaxies, formations, clusters of galaxies, things like that. And it all looks like it's little tiny little spirals within a fishbowl. And when you look at it, it's like, it's so tiny. How can this be so big when we say millions of billions and trillions of light years apart? And it's like, how? And we can't imagine. So recently I got this image that in truth, it's like how Source sees, it's all small. But our perception, it's filtered. So when you look at it through the Hubble's telescope, it looks small, you see? So that's, the consciousness is how it's viewed, right? The filter for that consciousness is what we use to have those different perceptions. So in a way, apply it to your reality and look at the nature perhaps of different planets versus planetary consciousness. You would say, is it all just one planet in its myriad versions and forms? You know, like we have with our Gaia. We say Gaia, New Earth, New Gaia. So it's like different stages of the birthing process. When you see the nature of you say, okay, this planet provides life. Ooh, that's almost like Earth. We're seeking for planets who resemble Earth. So we look for the alternatives of expanding our realities and our living situations and conditions on those planets. But we don't see that planets within certain similar structures in a parallel reality it's how it's viewed in a different way. It's kind of hard to explain this. I hope you're getting by. Sorry. But it's the same with our various multidimensional aspects. So you might see, okay, this is me sitting here. It's just one facet of me, one filter. But when you connect to higher aspects of you in a multidimensional fashion, it's not perhaps, like I said before, that you need to now have visions of yourself in different lives and realities. It doesn't have to be anything spectacular like that. But you will, it's transferred through these gifts, through understanding of the soul. The soul's understanding comes through these gifts. So recently I had my own expansion into this, and I started doing these channel cosmic drawings. I'm still doing them because initially I thought it's going to be 13 of them as a 13th octave, and then I just started getting more and more visions. And I'm like, where do I stop? And it's like, I don't know. That's the now. And I was shown that I can no longer place these things like constructs, like, okay, it's going to be 13 of them, and that's final. And before I even fall into the process. So I was actually myself moving through this challenge of needing to expand beyond that and just allowing the process to naturally unfold. Because at first I thought, okay, initially I have this idea of the book and that's how it started, and then it moved me away from it and then back to it, but in a different way than before. So it's kind of hard to explain how this multidimensional operational system works, but it's pretty fantastic. I'm loving it. I hope you loved and enjoyed this video. That's so much for today. It's over an hour long already. I was hoping to get a little less, but there is no time in truth. So you watch it if you enjoyed. You probably fell into this timeless zone and the twilight zone. You know, in these books from Dolores, it's often spoken about these extraterrestrial experiences, and some are of contracted time, like condensed time, and some are of missing time. And it's very interesting. It depends on, again, which consciousness, which wave, which vibrational attunement was used for what purposes. So that's all it is. That's how our cognition is formed. It's all through these vibratory rates, which in the end, these brainwave consciousness waves, they're all about. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you had fun with me today. If you can, if you get a chance, please check out my Tantrika Life Course Mastery, because it's so deeply important for where we are now, for where a lot of you ascending ones are at, we are at. So, yes, so much. And I hope you really work on your conscious expansion through really being observant with yourself, tuning into different waves, seeing and being discerning what you will allow in your reality and what you will not, because you can always say no to, and we transcend that by our recognition of what is and what's really important for our ascension and our ascension. Take care, as always, with so much love, wisdom, and power, with endless infinite devotion for all of this. And if you get a chance, you can also visit my webpage, Serapina Light, check out my other services, and perhaps even consider making a conscious energy exchange if you're so guided for these videos. And I'll see you soon again. Take care. Bye.